The Grand Council was an imposing sight. Set in the heart of the galaxy, this was where the mightiest species gathered to discuss matters of great importance, their power radiating in the vast chamber. The walls were adorned with symbols from the galaxy's oldest and most advanced races, and in the center, a round table sat at the heart of the room. Around it, representatives from various species, each more imposing than the last, stood ready for the council to begin. The largest and most impressive among them was the Zornar, a race of towering beings whose thick, metallic skin gleamed like armor. Their leader, Koreth, stood with arms crossed, exuding an air of dominance. Beside him, the Eldrith, a race of long-lived beings with minds as sharp as their ethereal beauty, hovered silently, their forms shimmering in the dim light. The Kiln, known for their raw power and overwhelming strength, sat with their powerful limbs at rest, ready for whatever challenge awaited. And then there was humanity. The human delegation was far smaller. A single representative, Ambassador Grace Dennison, sat alone at the back of the room. She was a figure often overlooked, her calm demeanor nothing like the intimidating presence of the other species. Ambassador Dennison had earned her place at the table through sharp intellect and remarkable diplomacy, but it was clear that in the eyes of the galaxy's elite, she was a curiosity at best. Humanity's representatives had always chosen to sit quietly at the back, never seeking to make a spectacle of themselves. As the meeting began, the various species exchanged pleasantries and pleads for cooperation. The subject quickly turned to the growing influence of humanity, an influence that had begun to unsettle some of the galaxy's older races. The Eldrith, with their perfect memory and centuries of experience, had noted humanity's rapid expansion into previously untapped territories. The Kiln, more blunt and straightforward, simply saw the human population growing at an alarming rate, spreading across star systems like a wildfire. Koreth, leader of the Zornar Empire, was the first to speak on the matter, his deep voice booming across the room. "This human race has risen quickly, too quickly," he growled, his eyes narrowing. "Their technology is advancing faster than any species we've encountered. I propose we slow their expansion before they become a serious threat." There was a murmur around the table. The Eldrith spoke next, their voices light and melodic yet laced with warning. "Indeed, the humans' progress cannot be ignored. But we must ask, why do they not show their full hand? Why are they content to remain in the shadows? There is something about their quiet nature that feels unsettling." Ambassador Dennison, who had been listening intently but not interjecting, finally spoke, her voice soft but clear. "I understand your concerns," she began, her gaze steady. "But we do not seek to dominate. We seek understanding, cooperation, and mutual benefit." Her words were met with silence. The Zornar leader scoffed. "Understand. Cooperation," Koreth sneered. "Do not mistake us for fools. The history of this galaxy is one of conquest. If you do not assert yourselves, others will take advantage of your passivity." Dennison did not flinch. She remained calm, her posture relaxed. And yet history also shows us that force is not always the answer. You can crush a species underfoot, but you cannot crush their will to rise again. A few of the representatives exchanged glances. They had not expected such a response from a species that, until recently, had been so quiet. The tension in the room was palpable. What did humanity know that the rest of the galaxy did not? "Perhaps," Dennison continued, "the question is not why we sit at the back of the room, but why you choose to stand at the front." She leaned back in her seat, her eyes glancing at the council members one by one. "We don't need to stand at the front to be heard. When humanity speaks, you will listen, whether we are in the back or not." The room fell silent once more. The challenge had been laid, subtle but undeniable. The question was no longer about humanity's position in the room. It was about their place in the galaxy. What were they truly capable of, and when would they choose to rise? As the discussions continued, the council members couldn't shake the feeling that humanity, quiet, humble, and seemingly passive, was much more than they appeared. The galaxy's mightiest species were beginning to realize that they might have underestimated the one race that didn't need to announce its power to be dangerous. Weeks after the Grand Council meeting, tensions remained high. Whispers about humanity's rapid rise spread like wildfire across the galaxy. No one could quite figure out how a species so unassuming could have become such a force in such a short time. Then came an opportunity to test the humans. A diplomatic mission to the planet Corn 5, a world rich in resources, but divided by years of conflict between multiple factions. The Council saw this as the perfect moment to observe humanity's approach to negotiation. The Zorner Empire, always eager to exert its dominance, suggested sending their own negotiators to take control of the situation. But when the humans proposed a single representative for the task, the Council laughed. A human diplomat, they thought, would be no match for the deeply entrenched rivalries between the Corn 5 factions. Humanity, however, had something else in mind. Ambassador Grace Dennison, the same unassuming figure who had spoken at the Council, was once again selected for the mission. She was known for her quiet strength, a sharp mind hidden beneath a calm exterior. Her reputation was solid but understated. She didn't carry the weight of military power or a long list of conquests. Instead, she had built her career on resolving crises that others had deemed impossible to solve. To the other species, her name carried little significance compared to the towering figures they were used to dealing with. This would be a challenge, and they expected her to fail. Arriving at Corn 5, Dennison immediately noticed the fragile atmosphere. The planet was divided into 3 major factions, each one with its own army, its own leader, and its own grudges. The once thriving world had been torn apart by civil war, with no clear resolution in sight. The factions viewed the human diplomat with suspicion, seeing her as an outsider who would either fold under pressure or be easily manipulated. They couldn't have been more wrong. As she entered the conference room, Dennison was greeted by hostile stares and harsh words from the faction leaders. The room was filled with tense silence, broken only by the sharp clicks of claws against stone and the low murmurs of dissent. The Zorner ambassador, who had been waiting in the background, couldn't hide his smirk. He believed this would be over quickly. But Dennison remained calm. Her first words were simple. "I'm here to listen." She didn't raise her voice, didn't demand respect, nor did she try to intimidate. She simply waited for each faction to present their grievances. The room fell quiet as the first leader, a hulking, powerful being from the Tyrant race, spoke of his people's lost land, the injustices they had endured, and their need for reparations. The second leader, a fierce, fiery member of the Troc species, argued for the preservation of cultural heritage, which the Tyrant had long sought to erase. Dennison nodded slowly after each statement, her eyes never leaving the speakers. She understood the weight of their words, but her task was not to appease them with promises or empty gestures. Instead, she focused on what was unsaid. The fear, the pride, the hesitation in each voice. She waited for the moment when each faction revealed not what they thought they wanted, but what they truly needed. When the time came, Dennison spoke, not with grand declarations, but with an understanding that seemed to resonate in the hearts of every leader. "You are not fighting over land," she said. "You are fighting to protect what you have left. You fear losing the one thing that makes you who you are." The room went silent again. For the first time, the leaders were taken aback, unsure how to respond. Dennison continued, "You each have a history, a pride that is tied to this land. But unless you acknowledge the other's right to that same pride, none of you will ever be able to move forward. The solution doesn't lie in domination. It lies in understanding." Her words cut through the years of bitterness. For the first time in what felt like forever, the leaders saw a glimmer of possibility, a way to negotiate, a way to compromise. The next few hours were spent hashing out terms, but it wasn't until Dennison carefully suggested a shared governance model, one that respected each faction's heritage and rights, that the tension in the room began to ease. By the end of the day, an agreement was reached that, while far from perfect, was a monumental step toward peace. As she left the conference hall, the other delegates, including the Zorna representative, were stunned. The negotiations had been intense, and yet, without any display of force or threats, humanity had achieved what the other species had believed impossible. Ambassador Denison's quiet diplomacy had turned the tide. Back at the Grand Council, whispers started circulating. Humanity had done the unthinkable. They had not only resolved a conflict that had plagued Corn 5 for centuries, but had done so with patience, empathy, and a wisdom that none of the galaxy's mightiest races had expected. Once again, humanity had shown that strength didn't have to be loud or overwhelming to be effective. The question wasn't why humanity sat at the back of the room. It was why they hadn't been taken more seriously sooner. The news of humanity's success on Corn 5 spread quickly across the galaxy, but it was still far from enough to convince the other species that the humans were more than just a nuisance. To the Council's most powerful races, human diplomacy was a fluke, a rare moment of luck. Humanity had managed to broker peace between warring factions, but the true test of a species' worth was always power. Power in war, in strength, in combat. And so, when the annual Stellar Tournament was announced, the Council saw it as the perfect opportunity to prove once and for all whether humanity could truly hold its own in a galaxy of superior species. The Stellar Tournament was not just a competition. It was the competition. Each year, the most advanced and powerful races competed in a series of tests: strength, agility, intelligence, and strategy. The rules were simple. Show what your species could do and prove that you were the strongest in the galaxy. It was a brutal event, filled with trials that tested both the mind and body, with only the strongest emerging victorious. For every race, the tournament was a chance to flaunt their superiority. The Zornar Empire, with its overwhelming physical power, sent their greatest warriors, towering giants who could crush entire armies with their bare hands. The Eldrith, with their ageless minds and psychic abilities, sent a representative who had been trained in mental warfare for centuries. The Kiln, a race of beings forged in the heart of stars, sent their fiercest combatants, whose very presence was enough to strike fear into the hearts of their enemies. But when the humans declared they would be sending a single participant, the other species scoffed. Why would humanity, which had no known warrior class, send only one fighter to such a prestigious event? Some even believed it was an act of cowardice, a sign that humans knew they couldn't compete. Humanity's representative was an unknown, Sergeant Rachel Ray Carter, a soldier with no significant history in galactic combat. She was not a general, nor a renowned strategist. Her skills, on paper, seemed modest compared to the vast resources the other races had at their disposal. But the humans insisted that she was the best candidate, a testament to their trust in individual strength over collective superiority. The day of the tournament arrived, and the competitors assembled in the grand arena. The energy in the air was thick with anticipation, with thousands of spectators watching from all corners of the galaxy. As the first round began, the human fighter was pitted against a massive Zornar warrior. The Zornar, confident in their brute strength, charged forward with a roar, expecting an easy victory. But Carter did not fight like the others. She wasn't interested in a head-to-head brawl. Instead, she used the environment, using her agility to evade the Zornar's powerful strikes. With every blow, the Zornar wasted more energy, and Carter's calm, calculated movements wore him down. She didn't rely on brute force. She outmaneuvered him, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It wasn't long before the Zornar warrior, exhausted and enraged, made a fatal mistake. With a swift, precise move, Carter disabled him in a single blow, sending him crashing to the ground. The crowd was silent for a moment, stunned by the unexpected outcome. Carter stood over the fallen warrior, not gloating, but simply waiting for the match to end. Her eyes were calm, unblinking. The victory was not the spectacle that the other species had anticipated, and it left them questioning everything they had assumed about humanity. The tournament continued, and Sergeant Carter faced one opponent after another. The Eldrith's psychic combatant, a being capable of reading minds and manipulating thoughts, was no match for her sheer unpredictability and the steady mental discipline she had developed through years of military training. A Kiln warrior, strong enough to bend steel with its bare hands, was outsmarted by Carter's understanding of tactics and her ability to use the terrain to her advantage. By the time Carter reached the final round, the arena was electric with curiosity. The human, once dismissed as weak and insignificant, had defeated some of the galaxy's greatest warriors with a combination of strategy, skill, and adaptability. The final battle was against a Troc, a species known for their raw speed and agility, capable of evading most attacks and overwhelming their enemies with sheer swiftness. But again, Carter proved herself. She had studied the Troc's movements, anticipated their patterns, and used her superior endurance to outblast her opponent. With a final, expertly timed move, she pinned the Troc to the ground, claiming victory. The crowd erupted into a mixture of disbelief and awe. The Zornar, the Eldrith, the Kiln, all of them were left speechless. Humanity, a species they had written off as insignificant, had won the tournament. Not by overpowering their enemies with raw strength, but by outthinking, outmaneuvering, and enduring longer than anyone thought possible. The galaxy's mightiest races were left with a question that would haunt them for years to come. How had humanity, who sat in the back of the room and kept to the shadows, defeated them all? The answer was clear now. It wasn't about being the loudest, the strongest, or the most powerful. It was about knowing when to step forward and when to rise to the challenge. The galaxy's most powerful species could no longer ignore the growing influence of humanity. After Sergeant Carter's unexpected victory in the stellar tournament, the question of humanity's strength became more pressing than ever. What were they hiding? How had a species so young and seemingly unremarkable come to command such respect? What was it about humanity that made them so dangerous without flaunting their might? The Grand Council convened once again. But this time, the members were not discussing the future of the galaxy. Instead, they were focused on one question: what exactly were humans capable of? The Eldrith, with their millennia of knowledge, took it upon themselves to look into humanity's history. The Eldrith were the oldest species present in the Council, their long lives granting them unparalleled wisdom, and their archives contained records stretching across countless eons. Surely, the answer to humanity's mysterious strength must lie in their past. So they dug deep into human history, eager to uncover the secret that would explain their unexpected rise. What they found was unsettling. The human race had survived against all odds since its very beginning. Their history was littered with moments of miraculous survival, unexpected triumphs, and a pattern of rising from the ashes. From their ancient past, the Eldrith discovered that humanity had faced numerous apocalyptic events, plagues, wars, natural disasters, and even threats from other species that had pushed them to the brink of extinction time and again. And yet, in each instance, humanity had found a way to persevere. The Eldrith found records of humanity's greatest wars, where against overwhelming forces, they had turned the tide with strategies no one expected. There were stories of small groups of humans standing firm against empires hundreds of times their size, of entire cities falling but the survivors regrouping and rising once more. And then there were the countless inventions, advancements in technology, science, and medicine that had propelled humanity forward, often at a pace faster than any other species could match. But it wasn't just their ability to fight that stood out. What the Eldrith uncovered most were the patterns in humanity's history. It was their incredible adaptability, their ability to come together in the face of chaos, and their talent for turning even their greatest failures into lessons that allowed them to grow stronger. Humanity's ability to unite in times of crisis was like no other. When faced with an overwhelming threat, humans were able to put aside their differences and forge alliances that often led to victory. While other species focused on their power and dominance, humans focused on innovation, unity, and perseverance. Their greatest strength lay not in their weapons or technology, but in their unwavering will to survive and thrive. The more the Eldrith studied, the more they realized that the true strength of humanity lay in their relentless resolve to adapt and overcome. Time and time again, the human race had faced impossible odds, and each time they had found a way to rise above. They didn't just fight to win. They fought to protect what mattered most, whether that was their families, their culture, or their future. But the most surprising discovery was the fact that humanity never boasted about their victories. They never flaunted their strength. They didn't need to. They knew that their true power was not in showing off, but in preparing for the moment when their strength was needed most. The humans weren't interested in the spotlight. They were focused on the quiet preparation, the discipline, and the long-term strategies that allowed them to outlast their enemies. This revelation sent ripples through the council. The other species had underestimated humanity because they hadn't understood what made them truly dangerous. Humanity was not a species that sought glory or power. They didn't need to prove anything to anyone. They only needed to survive, and in doing so, they became a force no one could ignore. The Zornar Empire, which had once laughed at humanity's unassuming nature, now viewed them with caution. The Eldrith, who had once seen them as naive and unworthy of attention, began to question their own assumptions. Even the Kiln, who prided themselves on their overwhelming strength, now wondered if they had misjudged humanity. At the next Grand Council meeting, the atmosphere had shifted. The other species sat in silence, aware that they were no longer the undisputed powers of the galaxy. Humanity had shown them that strength wasn't always about might. It was about resilience, adaptability, and the quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly when to rise and when to step back. And the most unsettling realization of all was this: humanity had only just begun to show the galaxy what they were capable of. The true question now wasn't how humanity had come so far. It was how far they would go. As the galaxy's most powerful species continued to process the staggering revelations about humanity, another event was looming. A crisis that would soon shake the entire galaxy to its core. It was an event that would require every species to put aside their differences and come together in the face of something far greater than they had anticipated. The Tetrak, a race of enigmatic beings from the outer rim of the galaxy, had long remained a mystery. Few had ever encountered them directly, and those who had came back with little more than vague reports and fragmented stories. What was known was that the Tetrak were ancient, possibly older than even the Eldrith, and their technology was said to be light years ahead of anything the Council had ever encountered. Some even believed that the Tetrak were capable of manipulating the very fabric of space and time. But then, without warning, the Tetrak struck. A sudden and unexplained attack on a mining colony near the border of Zornar space sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The colony was obliterated in mere hours, its inhabitants killed in a display of overwhelming firepower. The Zornar military, which had once been the undisputed rulers of the galaxy's war-making power, sent an entire fleet to retaliate. But they never returned. The attack was so swift, so precise, that it left the Zornar Empire reeling, unable to respond in kind. The threat was real, and the galaxy's mightiest species were facing an adversary unlike anything they had ever seen. For the first time in a long time, the Council was united, but not in their usual display of power. This time, they came together out of fear of the Tetrak, and fear of the unknown. It was at this moment that the humans made their move. While the other species scrambled to formulate a plan, humanity remained calm. Ambassador Grace Dennison, having gained respect in the Council for her steady hand and insight, was once again called upon to lead the effort. The humans, despite their earlier victories, were seen as little more than pawns in the galaxy's grand game. But Dennison had a unique approach. She insisted that the solution was not to outfight the Tetrak, but to understand them, to look beyond their technology and power and uncover what made them tick. As Dennison and her team of experts worked behind the scenes, one thing became clear: humanity had an advantage. The Tetrak, for all their power, had one glaring weakness: arrogance. The other species had assumed that they could defeat any threat through sheer force, but the humans knew that power wasn't always the key. Sometimes the key was in the unexpected, in leveraging the very thing that the enemy overlooked. Denison's plan was simple: use their own weapons against them. Instead of building larger fleets or developing more advanced weapons, humanity would use its greatest strength, their ability to think differently, to adapt, and to surprise. The first phase of the plan was to infiltrate the Tetrak's communication network. This was no easy feat, as the Tetrak's technology was beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. But the humans had done something the Council had not expected. They had studied the Tetrak from afar, quietly gathering intelligence, observing their patterns, and learning their weaknesses. Using a small, specialized team of hackers and strategists, they breached the Tetrak's secure communication systems, gaining access to valuable data. The next phase was the deployment of a countermeasure, one that humanity had been developing in secret for years. It was not a weapon of destruction, but a device capable of disrupting the Tetrak's ability to manipulate space-time. If the humans could neutralize their most powerful advantage, the Tetrak would be vulnerable. But it was a gamble, and no one knew whether it would work. Denison presented the plan to the Grand Council. Once again, the other species were skeptical. They saw the humans as an insignificant part of the equation, but there was little choice. No one else had any viable options, and the Tetrak were growing bolder with each passing day. Reluctantly, the Council agreed to give humanity a chance. The human forces were mobilized swiftly, and the device was deployed to a key Tetrak installation. What happened next took everyone by surprise. The Tetrak, who had believed themselves invincible, found their technological superiority shattered. The disruption device emitted a pulse that scrambled their ability to manipulate space and time, causing chaos in their systems. For the first time, the Tetrak were caught off guard. The humans didn't destroy them. They simply rendered them vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, the galaxy's mightiest races saw a glimpse of humanity's true potential. The Tetrak forces were overwhelmed, not by force, but by the humans' ability to outthink, outmaneuver, and exploit their weaknesses. The victory was not a victory of power, but of strategy and ingenuity. The other species were left stunned. Humanity had once again shown that their greatest weapon was not their strength, but their mind. The aftermath of humanity's victory over the Tetrak was nothing short of revolutionary. The Tetrak, once the most mysterious and feared species in the galaxy, had been driven back. But the victory wasn't just a military triumph. It was a testament to humanity's unique blend of intelligence, resilience, and quiet strength. The Grand Council, once filled with skepticism about humanity's place in the galaxy, now found themselves faced with a species that had proven time and again that raw power wasn't their only strength. It was now clear that humanity was more than a force to be reckoned with. They were a force that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Yet, with great power came great responsibility. The victory over the Tetrak had drawn a line in the sand. No one could deny the potential of humanity, but it also came with a heavy question. What would humanity do next? The answer came sooner than anyone had expected. Ambassador Grace Denison, who had quietly risen to become humanity's representative to the Grand Council, proposed a bold new initiative. Humanity, she argued, should not only be involved in the galaxy's decision-making process, they should lead it. It was time for humanity to redefine the terms of galactic diplomacy. Her proposal was met with mixed reactions. The Zornar Empire, which had long prided itself on its strength and dominance, was particularly resistant. The Kiln, whose vast military forces were unmatched, questioned whether humanity had earned such a responsibility. But Denison, unwavering in her calm confidence, had a strategy. She wasn't suggesting that humanity would rule the galaxy, but rather that they would offer a new path forward, one that prioritized cooperation over dominance, understanding over conquest. Power is not just about strength. Dennison said at the council meeting. It is about influence. It is about the ability to bring others together, to inspire change, and to ensure that the needs of all species are heard. Humanity has already proven that we can be trusted with this responsibility. The council was divided. Many of the older species were unwilling to concede leadership to a species they had once dismissed as too young, too inexperienced. The idea of a new order, one where humanity played a central role, was difficult for them to accept. And yet, something had shifted in the way they saw the humans. They no longer viewed them as mere survivors, clinging to existence by luck or chance. Humanity had proven that their strength lay in their ability to think, to adapt, and to outmaneuver their enemies without ever showing their hand. It was the Kiln, a race of beings forged from the very heart of stars, who first saw the potential in Dennison's words. Though the Kiln prided themselves on their unmatched physical might, they had learned to respect humanity's calm approach. They saw a kindred spirit in the humans. Both species understood the value of enduring through adversity, of relying on something deeper than mere force. "I agree with the human ambassador," said the Kiln leader, his voice deep and resonant. "We have all fought for survival, but perhaps it is time we fight for something greater, unity." Slowly, other members of the council began to speak up. The Eldrith, who had long been the intellectual powerhouses of the galaxy, recognized the strategic brilliance of humanity. The Zornar, despite their pride, began to see the value in a galaxy where power was balanced, not dominated by a single force. Even the Trolk, known for their pride in their agility and speed, acknowledged the strength of unity over the chaos of constant war. And so, the tide began to turn. The Grand Council, once a place where dominance and power were the currencies of negotiation, began to embrace a new vision. Humanity, through their actions, had shown the galaxy that true leadership wasn't about flexing strength. It was about knowing when to step forward and when to step back, about using intelligence and diplomacy to build a better future. The new galactic order wouldn't be based on the might of a single race or the oppressive strength of one empire. It would be based on cooperation, on mutual respect, and on the understanding that every species had a part to play. Humanity, with its unique ability to adapt and thrive in the face of adversity, would serve as the bridge between the galaxy's diverse cultures, guiding them toward a future where peace, not war, was the true measure of power. In the weeks that followed, Dennison became the voice of this new era. Her diplomacy was instrumental in crafting a series of new alliances, all built on the foundations of mutual trust. The galaxy was no longer a battleground. It was a place where different species could come together, share their strengths, and work toward a common goal. Humanity had not only proven its worth, they had reshaped the very fabric of galactic diplomacy. And as the galaxy looked on, the question was no longer whether humanity was a force to be reckoned with, but whether the other species were ready to follow humanity's lead. As the galaxy's political landscape began to shift, a new era of diplomacy unfolded, one where the strength of words, not weapons, was the greatest currency. Humanity's influence continued to grow, not because of their military might, but because they understood the power of unity and negotiation. The Grand Council's meetings, once filled with tension and opposition, began to take on a different tone. With humanity at the forefront, the Council became a place for dialogue, a platform where species could resolve disputes without resorting to the old ways of war. However, the changes brought by humanity's rise were not welcomed by all. Some factions, particularly those with a long history of domination, resented the new direction. They saw humanity's growing influence as a threat to their established power. The Zornar Empire, once the galaxy's undisputed military giant, found itself having to share the spotlight with smaller, less militaristic races, which seemed to undermine everything they had built. A small group within the Zornar Empire, led by the ambitious General Rakthor, began to stir dissent. They believed that humanity's peaceful diplomacy and focus on cooperation would only weaken the galaxy's resolve. Rakthor argued that the galaxy needed a dominant force to maintain order, and that without the military strength to back up agreements, peace was nothing more than a fragile illusion. "We cannot let them forget who holds the power," Rakthor told his followers in secret. "Humanity's approach may be effective for now, but it is unsustainable. When the time comes, we must remind them what true strength looks like." Rakthor's words spread through the Zornar ranks like wildfire, and soon there were whispers of a possible coup, an attempt to undermine the very foundation of the new galactic order. It wasn't just the Zornar who were uncomfortable with the shift. The Kiln, though generally supportive of humanity's rise, were also wary of losing their dominance. The Kiln's leadership quietly discussed their concerns, wondering if a unified galaxy under the influence of humanity would limit their ability to expand and thrive. Despite these undercurrents of dissent, humanity remained focused. Ambassador Dennison knew that the summit continued, with heated debates and discussions, but over time, something remarkable began to happen. The leaders who had once been divided started to listen. The Kiln spoke of the need for balance, the Eldrith offered wisdom on the importance of long-term vision, and even the Trok, who had never trusted humans, began to see the potential in a galaxy united by cooperation rather than conquest. As the summit drew to a close, it was clear that humanity's approach had begun to take root. The Zornar, though still wary, agreed to a ceasefire on their threats of rebellion. The Kiln and Eldrith also pledged to strengthen the new galactic alliances, and while the road ahead would be difficult, it was a road forged by understanding rather than fear. Humanity had quietly revolutionized the galaxy, not with weapons or force, but with the power of diplomacy, vision, and the quiet strength to remain steadfast in the face of overwhelming odds. And as the summit ended, one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same again. The summit concluded with a renewed sense of hope. The galaxy, once a place defined by its constant conflict and power struggles, was slowly evolving into a space where collaboration and unity were taking precedence. It wasn't perfect, and the road ahead would certainly be fraught with challenges, but the seeds of a new order had been planted. Humanity, through its diplomacy, intelligence, and unyielding spirit, had begun to guide the galaxy towards a more cooperative future. Ambassador Grace Dennison, though exhausted by the negotiations, knew the hard work had only just begun. The summit had created an agreement, yes, but that agreement needed to be followed through on. It needed to be put into action. The galaxy's leaders, while less openly hostile than before, still carried the weight of their long-held suspicions. There would be those who sought to undermine the progress, who clung to the idea of domination through force. But Dennison was undeterred. She had seen the power of humanity's ideas. She had seen what they were capable of when given the chance. As the days passed, humanity began to take a more active role in shaping the new galactic policies. Dennison, along with other human diplomats, worked tirelessly to ensure that the agreements reached at the summit were respected and put into motion. Slowly but surely, the galaxy's most powerful species were beginning to recognize that true strength didn't lie in force. It lay in the ability to communicate, to compromise, and to build lasting relationships. However, the rise of humanity's influence did not go unnoticed by all. While the Zornar and Kiln had accepted the idea of a cooperative future, others, particularly the more isolationist races, began to question whether humanity's leadership was a sign of weakness. The Tetrak, whose sudden retreat after the disruption of their technology had left them in disarray, were also beginning to recover, and whispers of their own plans for resurgence began to circulate. In the shadows of the galaxy, new alliances were forming, not around the idea of peace, but around the desire to maintain control. There were factions who saw humanity's rise as an opportunity to gain power, and those who feared that their influence would be eclipsed by the very species they had once ignored. These tensions, though not yet open conflict, were a reminder that the galaxy's newfound unity was fragile. And yet, despite the undercurrent of dissent, humanity's role as a peacekeeper continued to grow. Dennison's leadership became a symbol of the future, of a galaxy that could be more than just a collection of warring factions. Through her efforts, and those of countless others, the old ways of thinking began to crumble. Diplomacy, patience, and strategic partnerships became the foundation for this new era. In a galaxy filled with species who had spent centuries at war, humanity had shown them all the power of something different. As Dennison stood at the balcony of the Galactic Assembly Building, looking out over the thriving metropolis below, she couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. The path ahead was still uncertain, but humanity had proven that they could lead, not through conquest, but through the power of their ideals. They had shown the galaxy that they didn't need to dominate to be powerful. They had shown the galaxy that cooperation was not just possible, it was preferable. And as the stars twinkled above, Dennison smiled to herself. It was a new dawn, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. The quiet revolution was complete, and the future, though unpredictable, now held more promise than it ever had before. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had changed everything, and the rest of the galaxy was just beginning to realize that the true might of the species wasn't in their weapons, or their technology, or their armies. It was in their ability to inspire others to believe in something greater than themselves. And with that belief, anything was possible.